So the question is, what is a truly successful life? It's a very important question to ponder upon because these days success is always equated with lot of wealth, success in work, career, being able to live a comfortable life, having a lot of luxuries, and all the rest. So the beautiful metaphor given by Bhagavatam, which also comes in the Upanishads, the one who imagines to be an individual is like a one sitting in a chariot. So if there is a chariot, it's compared to the body is compared to a chariot. This is coming from Kathopanishad, and Bhagavatam also gives the same beautiful metaphor that the chariot has five horses. The five horses have reins, and then there is a charioteer, and the one sitting in the chariot rides in this chariot. Now, the metaphor is that the five horses are like the five senses, and the reins which control the horses is the mind, and the charioteer who holds the reins is the faculty of reasoning. And therefore, the metaphor is that if the five horses are not having the right reins and the right reason, that is to say, the right charioteer, then the horses go in any which direction, and the directions in which it goes are the objects of the senses. And because of that, the one sitting in the car, the one sitting in the chariot, is going here and there without any purpose. But on the other hand, if the charioteer is, which is, or to use a more modern example, a driver, if the driver is very sensible, then the driver steers the car or the chariot in the right direction, and the five horses are kept in good control, good regulation, and they are used to go in the right direction. So that is the difference between a regulated life and an unregulated life. So today, what we see normally is that life without any regulation of any kind, without any discipline, and being able to do whatever one wants is considered to be a very successful life. When there is a lot of money and there is a lot of luxuries available, and therefore being able to enjoy, so to speak, the five senses and then work. Bhagavatam uses these words which are very powerful: working like an ass, like a donkey, very hard to make a lot of money, and then when weekends come or when holidays come, go and spend that money in all these five directions in an unregulated way. This is what is presented as the model for a successful life. Whereas what we see with that is it is only giving temporary sense of pleasure, but people are having all kinds of problems come because of this. One is, even at a physical level, health is affected badly because of working very long hours and not sleeping properly, not eating properly, and so on. And then the senses being unregulated, going in all directions, is causing people to also engage in overloading the senses, watching a lot of whether it's movies or internet, looking at the phone and straining the eyes, listening to various things, going out and tasting different types of food. So, all of this sensory overload is causing only problems to the system. Whereas what Bhagavatam presents and what the wise sages have always presented as a truly successful life is where one works enough to have the necessary resources to live without any anxiety, and also the work that one does is engaged in serving society in some way or the other. So, whatever skills one has, one can be good with learning, one can be good with administration, one can be good with business, or one can be good with even hard manual labor. Whatever skills one has, to recognize what one's skills are, which is called as Swadharma, and then engage those skills in serving the society at large in a positive way, and thereby also making some money. So the primary focus is not how much money I can make, but what service I can offer and make some money too, because one needs to make a living and live reasonably comfortably. So the whole paradigm of the Vedic culture, of the way of the rishis, is what is called as simple living and high thinking. In other words, how much time we can spend in high thinking is the measure of success, not how much time I am working hard for some boss who's got some very narrow view of life and just worried about reviews, worried about when the job may go away, and working out of fear or working out of desire and greed, and then making money through this process. Narada calls it the life of a thief. It's a very, Narada's words are very blunt and it's very hard hitting, and yet it's important for us to look into how we live, also how we guide our children or the younger generation to live, because the purpose of human life is to engage in high thinking. High thinking means to inquire, to do self inquiry, to recognize the true nature of who I am, and thereby realize God as the only truth there is. That's the true success of life, and in the process, also engage one's faculties and one's skills in helping society in some way. So, if one is good in business, one can engage in good businesses that are helping society in a positive way. Same with administrative skills, same with teaching and learning, and so on. Any skill that one might have, and these are the basis of varnas. It's a very scientific way of dividing society, not what it has degenerated into as a caste system today. But if you really look at the essence of it, it is to recognize one's spirit, one's propensities, one's talents, be very aware of one's strengths, and use those strengths to serve society, to make some resources, to make a living, and whatever leisure time one has, and have plenty of leisure time wherein one can engage in higher order activities such as listening to scriptures, reading them, meditating, and engaging in devotional chants, and essentially rooting oneself in the heart, because work always pulls us into the mind and it's necessary to use the mind to do the work. But the more time we can spend rooted in the heart, the more we can truly realize the purpose of life. So that's the essence of the highest purpose of living, which is not in any way in conflict with living a good life. So the important thing people immediately ask is, it doesn't, so if everybody goes to the Himalayas, then what will happen? That's, in fact, that's not at all what is recommended. What is recommended is to identify one's strengths, which is Swadharma, and then use those strengths to serve society and make money. So make sure one's work is very dharmic and very helpful to society, and the spare time is engaged in activities which are taking one deeper into one's own being. It's a very beautiful way that Bhagavatam gives, which is the same as what all the great rishis have given. And it's a very relevant message for society today, for youngsters today, and even for adults, for people who are working. Is am I first of all engaging in work which is making me feel I'm contributing something positive to society? It's a very important question to ask, which most people don't. If we just simply chase the highest pay, Bhagavatam says that is the attitude of the lowest grade of people. The lowest grade of people simply work for money. So if one has to go up in life, to elevate oneself, to realize the higher purpose of life, money has to be only a secondary factor, not to be ignored because one certainly needs money, but it has to be not the primary factor, it has to be a secondary factor. And success in life has to be defined based on how peaceful one is, how loving one is, how stress free one is, and the ability to live free of conflicts, live free of greed and envy and anger, and live with unconditional love towards everyone. That is the true measure of success. And if one sees it in this way, it's a total paradigm shift, and the whole society can completely reorganize itself in this way, wherein one can still work in technology, one can still work in science. In fact, all of these can be used for the good of society if one works in the right way and not work on things which are only making people more addicted to technology or addicted to various things. So, the most important thing is for everyone, it's very important to see if we are living the human life the way it is meant to be as the highest blessing, or are we living simply like animals? And more importantly, for many here who are in the position to guide the next generation, how are we guiding the next generation, whether our children or maybe even grandchildren or other people? Are we asking them to go behind money? Are we asking them to go behind status? Or are we encouraging them to look at the highest way of living a good life, which is to live a life of peace and love and serving society while also using the skills they have in a meaningful way? So it's a totally different paradigm, which the beauty of the rishis of the Vedic culture all along is it's a very holistic way of living presented, where everybody is engaged in a meaningful way, the whole society is in harmony, there is economic progress. That's why it is always mentioned as the fourfold goals of life: dharma, artha, kama, moksha. So, dharma is placed first, which is to live a righteous, virtuous life, and with the foundation of dharma, to have wealth, artha, and to have kama, which is the necessary sensual comforts, and the highest order goal being moksha, which is liberation and living in freedom. So, this way of ordering one's life rooted in dharma, working with the foundation of dharma, and keeping the higher order principle of self realization as the most important aspect of life, while engaging in activities to make some wealth and to have some comforts, This kind of living is the model presented by Bhagavatam, it's the model presented by the Vedas, by the Rishis, and it is the model presented by all the great sages. And this is something that is to be taught to all children, to all youngsters, because it doesn't deny anything, it doesn't make everyone into a monk. The way of living as a monk is only for a few who are drawn to it. Others can live the life of a householder, a student first and then a householder, and yet realize the same highest principle that the monk is able to. The only difference that the monks do is that they also have the time to go spread this wisdom to others, to write about it, to talk about it, to spread with others. But for one's own living and one's own family, one doesn't need to be a monk. One can simply engage in this life wherever one is and realize God wherever one is, while working, while having a family, and while engaging in all the activities that are necessary. This requires great intelligence to, first of all, recognize what is the purpose of life, which most people don't ask the question. Simply to make money and to have a bigger and bigger house, bigger and bigger car, and everything that will simply be snatched away from us when the time of death comes. It is such a meaningless thing, and yet people pursue this like that's the most important thing. It's important to have a decent house to live in, to have a car if one needs a car to go from point A to point B, but to optimize only those parameters and to ignore the most important aspect of life, which is the true inner richness, is a life of poverty. And that's the life of poverty that many people are living today in today's society. And the system is encouraging that. And many people are also going with that model. What has happened, especially in a culture like Bharat or even otherwise, but especially in India, is that people have lost touch with this culture completely, being influenced by the model of the West and simply chasing rather than the other way around. It has to be where truly the Vedic culture can teach the West and teach the rest of the world of how to live with both economic progress and inner satisfaction, inner peace, inner love. So, and this is something that's so vital that Bhagavatam repeats it again and again. All the scriptures repeat it again and again as to the true act of compassion, the true act of love is not just one's own self realization, but to make sure the culture supports it so that the youngsters, the people at large are all taken in the right way. Prahalad in Bhagavatam beautifully says that I don't even want God realization. That is to say, he says, I don't even want to go to Vaikuntha, but I only want to help all these people who are caught in the wrong way of living. So he is an embodiment of compassion because he says he is advising the demoniac boys, which is representing the civilization of today. And the demoniac civilization we have today is what Prahalad talks about too in Bhagavatam, and he says everyone can realize this, and yet they are lost in chasing such temporary goals, luxuries, and living like animals who are interested only in survival and reproduction. So, this way of compassion for all living entities, and especially humans who have the faculty to realize the highest order of living, is the very essence of the, the most sublime culture one can have. So the culture one can have far different from what it is today, which is what is called as a dog eat dog world or rat race. Everything, even the terms we use, shows that it's a way of animals. As somebody said, even if we win a rat race, you still remain a rat. So, living in a rat race, living in a dog eat dog world, as it's called, all of this simply clearly shows, even the language shows that this is the way of animals. And the way of humans, the true realization of a human life, is to recognize the highest principle for ourselves and also for helping others, whoever we can, in our small circle of influence, to recognize that you can live in a different way while also living comfortably and with true inner richness, because the idea of having millions or billions of dollars in the bank does not translate to any material difference, even let alone inner difference. Beyond a certain point, as it is said, one can only eat 2 or 3 meals a day, one can only have 6 foot of space at any point. So there is no sense in running behind more and more and more, and yet that's what people do. If instead we recognize that our skills and talents and strengths can be used in serving society, and the time available can be engaged in inquiry and in listening to scriptures and to meditate, and they both feed each other, because being able to engage in these kinds of meditative time helps one work with focus, with an attitude of service, and working with an attitude of service gives one the time and space to engage in meditation. So they both feed each other nicely, and we can live a very harmonious life. So that's what is true successful life, which is a completely different model from what the present model is presenting. Culture in which a society functions is very vital for saints and sages to come. So we cannot isolate and simply say that no matter what happens, it doesn't matter. I just simply focus on my own salvation, because, first of all, the very premise is wrong. There is nobody here to get salvation. There is no individual. That is the whole point. And therefore, if there is no compassion for all suffering beings, then there is only escapism in many cases. If one is truly, completely realized, then his very presence is an act of compassion. And until that happens, one has to engage. And even after that, the Buddha, for example, that's why he said the only response in this world is compassion. Because when we open our eyes and we see the world and we see people who are suffering in so many ways, the only true response is compassion and love. And whatever action comes out of that is the only intelligent action. And for those who are engaged in realizing this, the beauty is compassion and love is both the means and the way and the end. So if we are rooted in love and compassion, then that automatically removes the dust of the ego, which is what is true salvation also. So realization or salvation is not some personal achievement, but it is the dissolving of the personality itself. And therefore, the dissolving of the personality happens through compassion and love. So it's both the means and the end.